Good morning, everybody, and thank you for your time. I'm going to try to tell you guys a little bit about environmental planning and historic preservation. By the end of this, what I'd like for you all to be able to do is to be able to have a conversation with folks and be able to tell them a little bit about what environmental planning and historic preservation is all about, otherwise known as EHP. What is important regarding EHP, and be able to identify some of the laws, executive orders, and other things that apply during an EHP review. Do I have any grants people, grants managers, former grants managers? No? Okay. EHP is a part of the grants review process. Whenever there's a federally funded action, whenever federal dollars are involved, things have to go through a review process. There's several types of reviews that it goes through: engineering, cost-benefit analysis, insurance, floodplains, and EHP is one of the cogs that it has to happen. EHP also supports FEMA's mission in every phase. This is the truncated version of FEMA's mission. I didn't know it got smaller, but it is. Helping people before, during, and after disasters. EHP is involved in each one of those phases, before, during, and after. A lot of folks you will run into in the field or at town halls or at various meetings that we go to will ask you, particularly the grantees, the applicants, why do we have to do EHP? Why do we have to consider the environment? Why does it cost us so much time and money to do this? The short, sweet answer to give them is not necessarily because it improves our quality of life to try to save the environment, but to say the law applies. In 1969, we passed something called the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 that requires us to consider the environment and all the environmental laws when we fund things with federal dollars. And that is the gist of why we have to do EHP. It is required by law to be done. Now, does anybody think or know they might know any of the laws that would apply to the EHP process? We're talking about the environment, buildings, rivers, marshes. Any laws that come to mind?
Oh, well, historic preservation would be one, you know, anything that's over 50 years old when you're trying to deal with it, and I'll let you take it.
National Policy, the National Historic Policy Act.
Clean air.
Clean Air Act, correct?
Water.
Clean water, yeah.
Does this affect, like the animals, like
Mhm.
certain habitats for animals?
Endangered Species
And
Act.
endangered, I was gonna say.
Yeah. I think you guys nailed them all.
Possibly New Mexico, maybe you know, with the Native Americans, you know, that's a.
So, yeah, we have to consider tribal laws and things too. If there's a ground disturbance, if we come across, you know, a corpse or dead body, we have to consult with the tribes to make sure that it isn't someone related to them, or we have to stop working so that they can perform whatever ritual they need to perform. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on tribal lands, because we had the Trail of Tears that go from here to wherever. If we find something, we have to consult with them. But yeah, you guys just got just about all the laws that apply when it comes to the EHP review process. Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, Protection of Wetlands, National Environment Policy Act we discussed is the overarching one that controls everything. The National Historic Preservation Act is about structures and buildings. Tommy gave a perfect definition of it. If it's over 50 years old, we have to consider it a historic building.
You guys do much of, when you're looking at the wetlands, I was thinking about the Everglades. You do work with the Everglades?
We work with the wetlands because we now know, based on the Everglades, how important wetlands are to flood control. The Army Corps of Engineers, once upon a time, were trying to eliminate them. Now they're trying to restore them. So that was on the wetlands. But what these laws apply, and again, that's the short answer when people come up to you and they want to tell you ask you about why we have to do HP. The other thing to consider about this, as FEMA employees, is For those of us who are based here in Washington, and I guess across the country, there's a saying that a lot of we have at FEMA when we're doing work. It refers to the post. Does anybody know what that saying is? You don't want to make the post the hard way. You don't want to make the front page of the post the hard way, right? Right.
Washington.
Yes, Washington Post, sorry. You don't want to make the front page of the post the hard way.
So
we don't wanna-
LA Times.
Right. We
And
don't
the
want
National
to,
Enquirer.
right.
Probably the worst.
You don't want to fund a project and then have it make the front page of the Post and say FEMA gave these folks money and now we can't breathe. FEMA gave these folks money and now the water's tainted. You know? So that's why EHP is important. And there's consequences also for not performing an EHP review, again, rooted in the law, right? We have all kinds of environmental lawsuits. And environmental lawsuits are very easy to bring because in the law, there's something called standing. And what that means is you have to have a reason or be related to the lawsuit that you're bringing. I can't just sue you because you and her had a problem. I have to be involved. We are all tied to the environment, right? So anybody can walk into a courtroom and bring an environmental lawsuit, right? Anybody. And we get not tons, we get a lot at FEMA. What else can happen is if we don't perform the review properly, lose federal funds, and in some cases, say for instance where there's a disagreement between EHP and possibly the FCO, or logistics in terms of where we're gonna place trailers, and they don't follow our advice, and they put those trailers in a floodplain,
Oh, we don't.
and then they get washed away with people in them,
We can do that.
you know, somebody might go to jail. You know?
There you go, there you are on the post.
There you go.
Front page.
Again, I just want to point out again that EHP applies to all parts, all phases of the disaster process, before, during, and after. In terms of before, National Continuity Programs, COOP, Continuity Operations here and within FEMA, we have to review anything in terms of FEMA buildings, staging areas, iPaws. We still use the big radios for tornado warnings and things like that, the speakers to warn people about storms and hurricanes. All those things have to have an EHP review.
How frequently do you go back and review them?
So once it's reviewed once, unless there is a danger that something's going to occur with the dollars that we gave them, we only do it one time. We will put special conditions in sometimes and say you have to review these things every 3 years, but it's very rare. But again, the response phase again, with logistics, Ron showed you the picture of where all those tractor trailers are going. Can you imagine all of the fumes from 5,000 diesel trucks
Oh, wow.
rolling into one area?
That sounds like a lawsuit.
Never thought about that.
If you put them in a closed space, let's say we could put them all around in a mall garage,
Yes.
right? That'd be a problem,
Yeah.
right? So we have to have the kind of open spaces for staging areas when we have that kind of events going on. Same thing with JFOs. Folks from our staff go out on PDAs and other things.
What's a PDA?
I'm sorry. My apologies. Preliminary damage assessments. Those are when folks go out to assess the damage from storms before we award the grant.
Hey, Pat,
Yes,
where does EHP show up in a disaster recovery center?
before they're built, before they're awarded.
Oh, okay, you're not staffing it.
Actually, we do have staff in the recovery center to answer questions, but that's not our primary role in terms of the DRC. In terms of the DRC, we review where that building is, working with the state and other federal entities.
Sorry.
I went to the IA.
Again, temporary housing, permanent housing, roads and bridges, all those things have to have an EHP review. The pad sites, again, for those houses need to be considered, where we're gonna put them at, the effect on the environment. Is it near a bird, a frog, an insect, a plant, that might be eliminated because of FEMA-funded action. Those are the kind of things you consider. Public assistance, we work very closely with. It's the bulk of our work. We have what's called special exclusions for certain types of work where we've consulted with PA and said, hey, for debris removal, as long as you put it in a parking lot or on a hard surface, it's good to go. You're done. Long-term recovery, same thing. Anything that's got to be built, any ground disturbance has to have a EHP review. Mitigation can kind of be before or after, but it's the same thing. Any activity where it's federally funded has to have an EHP review. We also work with the National Flood Insurance Program to develop various policies as well. Major takeaway from this I'd like for you guys to go away with is that EHP compliance applies to all FEMA programs and all FEMA actions, direct or indirect. These buildings on this campus some of them are historic. They have to have an EHP review to buy new windows. It's a big deal up here with them in the windows. But we can't authorize it. We can't authorize the purchase of them if it won't fit the facade. So, summary. Can anybody tell me anything about how EHP supports FEMA's mission?
Sticking to the laws,
Right, keeping us out of court.
keeping us out of lawsuits,
Yep.
and basically, to me, you just opened my mind, because I thought it was only about the buildings and the endangered species, and now I see it's like it goes into every cadre, touching different aspects of it, so, really good.
All right.
We're doing that with disaster.
And hopefully everybody was able to see how EHP is a part of each phase of the disaster. So, and that's all I got. If you have questions, or if you want a copy of this, see me, come in, and you're welcome to it, and come see me later if you have questions.
Cool.